Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another round of Basis Picks. As always, please like and subscribe, share with a friend, a colleague, a relative, an associate, an enemy, any and all in between. It's appreciated. Now, I was actually going to do this yesterday because Osleys Iglesias was actually in a fight. I think it was a pro box fight. For those of you who don't know, he's 13-0 with 12 KOs, Cuban fighter, or at least technically he was 12-0 with 11 KOs yesterday until he had his fight. Obviously another knockout victory. Cuban fighter, 168 pounds. He is now the new David Morrell at 168. So I was going to obviously do this then, but because I kind of knew the fight was going to be a foregone conclusion, I decided to take some rest instead. With that being said though, look, there's a fight card tonight. There's a lot of the good ones on the undercard, but it's only really one fight worth really talking about. So we're going to cover that, and then we're going to get to the Two Kings event taking place on DAZN Saturday night. So without further ado, let's get into the picks. So Top Rank offering tonight, luckily on Sky Sports, so you get to watch it. Look, on the undercard, there's no fights on there where I'm looking at it and saying, oh, that's a good 50-50 or that's that's an acid test kind of thing. You know, Top Rank, what they normally do with their fighters, they build them slowly, but they just step up the level ever so slightly each fight after each fight. So I will be kind of watching with a keen eye. I know you've got Keon Davis, 23. He's doing his professional debut, obviously the brother of both Kelvin and Keyshawn. I know Kelvin's on the card as well. Again, I'm not expecting big things from those opponents, but Abdullah Mason, Troy Isley, Rais Salim, they're all on the card. Now Rais, I know, is he's kind of in a bit of a rebuilding spot after obviously the Sam Goodman defeat in his last fight. Been a bit inactive since then, so it'll be interesting to see how he does against what's his name, Hernandez Geraldo, something like that. So yeah, no predictions on that as such. I'll just watch with a keen eye and kind of see what happens. But what I want to talk about is the main event, Keyshawn Davis versus Gustavo Lemos. Now, most people know Lemos because he fought Richardson Hitchens in his last fight. It was 140 pounds, obviously IBF. It was an IBF final eliminator, I believe, at the time. And Gustavo Lemos, I think, came in at about 138 pounds or so. So people kind of thought, oh, he must be a bit undersized for this weight. But he took that test. A lot of people believe that he did enough to beat Richardson Hitchens in that fight. Me personally, I do think Hitchens just about won, but it was a very close fight, probably a lot closer than it was supposed to be, a lot more of an acid test than it was supposed to be. So he came away with some credit there, with a lot of people feeling he was robbed of the victory. So obviously that's up to you to decide how you feel about that. However, this fight wasn't a 140 fight, it's a 135 fight, and he came in extremely overweight for the fight. He came in at 141 pounds. Keyshawn came in at 134 something, so he's clearly done what he needed to do to make the weight. Whereas Gustavo Lemos, no idea why he wasn't able to make weight, but it means one of two things: either that's a weight class you're not supposed to be at, or you are very undisciplined. I guess we'll find out on the night. Now, the added intrigue to this is the fact that because he hasn't made the weight and he's 6 pounds over, maybe he hasn't had to get himself down, or really kill himself, really drain himself to get off those last few pounds, and as such could have a lot more energy reserves and have a lot more in the tank than Keyshawn Davis does come fight night. It makes putting a little bet on him very, very tempting, because you never know, based on sort of how all of that kind of works its way out. But on the flip side, it could also mean that maybe he just didn't take training seriously, which means he may not be in a fight ready condition for this one. which could mean that he gets broken down a bit easier. He gets he gets roughed up, he gets sort of dogged in the ring, doesn't really like it, and maybe doesn't have the necessary conditioning to see it out for a good solid 12 rounds. I don't know which way particularly to look at this one, but what I do think is, look, Keyshawn was a very good amateur, Olympic silver medalist. He's done pretty well as a pro. He is there to be hit, but he also keeps himself in that pocket so that he can get off the shots that he wants to get off as well. Not the strongest of punchers, but he's also got enough of a punch that makes you think, oof, like I don't really want to be taking too much of those. And you will see a lot of the time, a lot of his opponents do tend to to fall back a little bit when he does start landing and connecting. Not all of them though, and that's one of the key aspects of this fight. I think judging in this fight may be where a lot is won and lost. And if this fight does go to the cards, I do think that being the hometown fighter, Norfolk, Virginia, being obviously the quote-unquote the A side or the company person, I do think Keyshawn is going to be pretty comfortable on the cards, unless he's been dropped like 3 or 4 times prior to that, but I just don't see that happening. But I do think it will go to the cards, and I do think ultimately Keyshawn Davis will get a unanimous decision victory, with maybe 1 or 2 slightly concerning moments within the fight, but overall pretty comfortable, pretty confident, and yeah, pretty dominant on the scorecards. So that's my opinion. Kind of let me know what you guys think below. Okay, so now I guess we're moving over to the Matchroom card taking place in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at the Wells Fargo Center. So on this card, there is a lot of the Matchroom USA stalwarts, like the original talents that got kind of brought through the ranks. But at the head of the card, both guys have recently signed to Matchroom. Obviously, one at the tender age of 26, the other one at the tender age of 22, I believe, at the time. But on the card, you can see this card is extremely A-side heavy. It's a good card in terms of the talent that's on the card, like the guys, obviously in those A-side positions. But being realistic, there will, the fights will be competitive, but none of them will be, you would be highly surprised if any of the A-side competitors lost. Like, none of them are supposed to be 50-50 fights. On the card itself, there's only 2 fights I've seen that I believe are competitive, in the sense that the B side has got a legit chance of winning that fight if they do everything that they need to do. So I'm just going to run through the fights generally that I feel like are, quote unquote the gimmies. Like Austin Ammo Williams, I do think he's going to beat Jean Garrido, and I think he's probably going to stop him in those about sort of round 7, round 8. I think that's a likely a smart place for him. Now, Khalil Cole versus Manuel Gallegos. This is an interesting fight, only from the perspective of how much better can Gallegos do now he's at 175 instead of 168. I think, truth being told, like, him being at 175 isn't going to be that huge of an advantage to him. Yes, he had to boil down to make 168, but even though he's a very big 168, he's still not, going to be of the necessary size at 175 to really do anything. Ultimately, I think Khalil Cole gets this one done. I think he gets it done in and around the same time that Diego Pacheco got it done. He got the 4th round stoppage. I think Khalil's probably going to do between 4 and 5. Gallegos is, he's got some heart. He will try to win, but I think the fact that he's going to try and he's going to open up means that he's going to get caught. And Khalil Cole, if for nothing else, he does have devastating power when he lands, especially when he lands clean. So yeah, the other one that I think is going to be more of a gimme-ish type fight is Ray Ford against Orlando Gonzalez. Now he kind of impressed me in the Gonzalez impressed me a little bit in the press conference. Obviously, Puerto Rican, coming over, you know, speaking English. He said he apologized for his English at the start, and it ended up being almost perfect. So shout outs to him. And I feel like he's gonna go in there and give everything for the fight. But Ray Ford, I think, is just too skilled, and I don't think he's gonna rest on his laurels and let any of those early rounds slip away. I've been unsure about whether I think he's gonna go for the stoppage or whether he's going to go for points. My money is telling me that this is going to be a points decision, purely because I do think that Gonzalez is going to, you know, I think he's going to be tough, he's going to be durable, but I wouldn't bet against the late stoppage either. So the two fights that I actually think are going to be highly competitive before I get to the main event. The first one is Ernesto Tito Mercado versus Jesus Saracho. Now, I do think this is going to be a highly competitive fight. I think Saracho is going to come looking to unload heavy shots, unload bombs from early. 14-2 with one draw. Of his 14 victories, he's got 11 KOs. Yes, he has been stopped once as well, but that basically shows that he goes all out. He's all in, and he's about, you know, he's basically about that action. And either you get him out of there or he gets you out of there. That's the kind of test that Mercado needs, but he's been going from strength to strength. He's been fighting on a lot of showbox cards. I think he previously had a little bit of PBC activity as well, but mainly showbox. But yeah, Ernesto Mercado's a fighter that I've been keeping an eye on for maybe the last 12 to 15 months. I've been impressed by some of the performances. Yes, not against the greatest of people, but the power is there, the power is real, and I'm keen to see what he does in that super lightweight division. I believe he's 16-0 at the moment now, and it's like 15 KOs, so you know what he's going in there to do. It's going to be a shoot 'em out fight, but I think just the momentum that he's on and the run that he's, you know, had, especially with the knockouts. I know it sort of stopped and then it's now started back up again. I do think it's going to continue. So I am picking Ernesto Mercado to win this one via stoppage, but in and around those, about sort of round 7. But when it happens, I feel like the fight is going to be one of those back and forth ebb and flow type fights. So that's one that I'm really looking forward to seeing, even if it's not live, because I will be at a birthday celebration at that time. Right after that, so the other fight that I think has interest is Jesse Bam Rodriguez against Pedro Guevara. Now, Pedro has kind of been a perennial, you know, nearly man in all of the weights above light fly. He was a former light flyweight champion. Since he's moved up to flyweight and super flyweight, he's had opportunities, hasn't quite been able to get over the line in those fights, but he's got pedigree. He's only ever lost to great opposition, and he's never been stopped. 42 victories. I think he's got 22 KOs out of those 42. He's lost 4 times, but again, he's only lost to like Carlos Cuadras. I think Ioka he lost to Kenshiro Taraji. He lost to I think Yukamura, I think, is another one that he lost to. And the Carlos Cuadras was his most recent loss. That was a split decision as well. So, you know, usually when they say when the away fighter loses via split or majority, was it really a loss? It's one of those ones. But yeah, lost to Kenshiro Taraji. Yukamura was another one. And I think John Riel Casimero as well. And even that was another split decision. So he's never been, I said, never been stopped, always been in close fights. He's always kind of been that perennial contender, never quite getting over the line. So he's going to be going hell for leather to try and get this victory from Bam. Now, these are the type of fights that Bam usually has the tendency to switch off from. The ones where, like, you know, he's supposed to win and it's not a big name and a big scalp. But he has been carrying over his training from the potential Estrada rematch that he thought was going to take place. So the way I kind of see this fight breaking down is in those first early rounds. I feel like it's going to be very spirited between the two, possibly even with Bam having to come through some moments of discomfort and maybe even being a bit down on the cards, whereby Guevara is just like trying to basically use work rate to steal those rounds. But I think from about sort of round 3/4 onwards, I feel is where Bam's gonna get the measure of him, work the angles, work the timing out, start unloading and landing those heavy shots, and maybe Guevara at that point is going to choose to maybe tuck up and try to go into a bit of survival until those later rounds. But I think at that point, Bam will take over, command a strong lead, and then basically just do enough to keep himself in front for the rest of the fight, maybe even landing a knockdown somewhere in those later rounds, from that rounds 8 to 10. But I do think that it will go the distance overall. I do think Guevara is gonna have another fight where, you know, he does see the final bell. He doesn't quite get over the line, but shows and makes a good account of himself. But I do think that Bam will win the fight via unanimous decision. I do think he will get it on all three of the scorecards, and then move on to a possible unification or a big money fight down there in those lower weights. Moving on to Jaron Boots Ennis and Karen Chikadzian. Look, the first fight, Boots won it 12-0, like on all three cards, total domination, whitewash, but just couldn't really do enough to get Karen out of there. Constantly moved, stayed safe, stayed composed. This wasn't obviously at world level technically, it was under that level. So look, Chikadzian has said that he's gained a lot of experience, he's worked a lot harder since then, and he's promised that he's coming to fight. That being said, I do think he's going to put up more of an effort this time than he did last time. Possibly even he might get a couple rounds in someone's mind, but I do think him wanting to get in the ring and actually fight more and move less is basically just going to play more into Boots' hands. So I do think Boots is going to potentially try go looking for him early and try to invest everything downstairs to the body, maybe even a couple of dirty shots here and there, just to make sure that the legs don't move as much, don't move as well. Maybe some illegal punches as well, just to get him into a certain position where he can just start cutting the ring off and making it really small and really cramped and really congested. And every time sort of Karen tries to fight him off is when he's going to have his most easier successes. And I do think from about round 5 and onwards, like, it's going to be just a sustained beatdown, sustained beating until about maybe the 8th or the 9th round, where he's either going to get pulled out via towel being thrown in, or he's going to hit the deck maybe once, maybe twice, and then get waved off by the referee. But I do think this time, Boots said he wanted the stoppage. I do think he's going to get the stoppage, because I think Karen's going to look to engage a bit more than he did previously. So I'm going for the stoppage between sort of rounds 8 to 9. Please let me know what you guys think down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share. Thank you for watching. But for right now, Basis Picks locked.